Hi, welcome to my podcast, Becoming a Cut Flower Grower. I'm your host, Lydia, and I'm here to share my year of growing and selling cut flowers. I'll be giving you the lowdown on everything I'm doing and sharing all the highs and lows, the good times and the inevitable disasters, all in real time. Join me on my cut flower journey, starting right now. Hello, and a very warm welcome to the latest episode, and it has been really lovely and warm today. So it's Tuesday the 31st of March 2026 and you are joining me in the evening. I've had such a busy day and this is the first time I've actually sat down. Now, apologies again for the terrible quality of the last episode. I had a complete disaster and I tried my best to clear it up and make the podcast listenable too, but it was pretty horrific, I have to say. So thank you for bearing with me. And I've just bought a set of new microphones, which haven't arrived yet. Hopefully they're not in the Straits of Hormuz. But I have bought those with an Amazon voucher that I was given by the AA, who I get my breakdown cover with. And they put my premium up so much that I refused to renew it. And eventually they sent me a deal where they would give me a £40 voucher. And I thought, if you'd just given me a sensible price in the first time, I could have just renewed and you wouldn't have to give me a voucher. Anyway, they did. So I have ordered these new microphones and hopefully they will improve the overall sound quality. I must say I bought my old mics when I first started doing the podcast and they were super cheap because I didn't know whether the podcast would actually even work and whether I'd carry on with it. And they were clearly not fit for purpose. So hopefully today's audio is better. I've done some tweaks on them and fully charged them and I'm trying to be very careful and not move. So hopefully the quality is okay. Now the clocks went forward over the weekend. It always confuses me no end. And this has happened like every day over my life and I still haven't got my head around it. And, I don't actually have a normal watch anymore. And all the phones just update everything without you having to do anything. So I do find it very confusing. And I kept saying to my other half over the weekend, but what time is it really? And he says, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, but it does. And the chickens obviously are waiting for their tea at a different time because they don't know that the clocks have moved. So it does have an impact. Anyway, speaking of impacts, this evening, tonight's episode, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the Iran fuel crisis going on. And of course, it's not really a fuel crisis. It's a horrible, terrible, destructive war. And I am going to talk about it from a flower growing perspective. But I do want to caveat this by saying I'm aware it's a war where people are dying and it's horrendous. But this isn't a politics show and that's not what you're here to listen to. So I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the cut flower industry and the challenges and opportunities that it is presenting to us at the moment, assuming, of course, that people don't just stop buying flowers because they can't afford to eat anymore, which is, sometimes I think that's highly likely because the fuel prices are just insane at the moment. Anyway, I want to talk about it tonight. But I do want you to bear in mind that I'm not just thinking, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity because something terrible is happening somewhere in the world and it means that we're all going to make lots of money. That's not what I'm saying at all. So you will have heard the 80 to 90% statistic on imports into the UK because I have mentioned it quite a few times. I think it's a really, really big number. And I've said to you, it means that there's a huge opportunity for us growers to take a share of this percentage. Now, the official stats, and I'm sorry if you're listening in the US for this, but I'm talking about the stats from the UK government, are that half of our imports are Dutch, about a quarter are from Kenya, and the rest are from Colombia, Ecuador, and a few other countries. But this is the important thing. The Dutch aren't just growers. They're actually a global international trading hub. So as well as growing their own stems, they're also receiving and processing flowers from all over the world. And they run them through these massive auctions that they have, and then they sell them on. So they're a little bit like Dubai is an international airport hub and Heathrow is a hub. So the Dutch are doing this kind of thing and they've really got control of the market. They are like the place for processing flowers. So the reality is that when it says Dutch grown or Dutch imports, the actual volume that is actually grown by the Dutch in the Netherlands accounts for about 10 to 20% of that 50% figure. So if you're doing the maths along with me, it means that the 50% that the UK imports from Holland, from the Dutch, are about 10 to 20% are actually grown by the Dutch, and all of the rest are imports. So when you look behind that 80 to 90% figure, here in the UK, we're importing an awful lot internationally, i.e., outside of Europe, which means that we are going to be quite susceptible to these price changes as a result of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. So let's just very quickly look at how the fuel prices have changed just in the last month. So crude is up about 30% a barrel, petrol up about 30 to 40%, natural gas up to about 70%, and then electricity will go up off the back of that. Jet fuel is up 82% at the moment, diesel about 22% in the UK. Now, the really crucial bit here is that urea/fertiliser is up about 65 to 77%. This is partly down to the natural gas price increase and also the trade disruption, because a lot of these fertilizers and the amendments that are used in the fertilizers are coming through the Straits of Hormuz and that particular area. Now, you might be thinking, well, why does this matter? It matters because cut flour imports into the UK rely on a number of crucial things. There are a number of elements to it. One is air freight, one is refrigeration, greenhouse heating is another one for the Dutch mostly, and also fertilizer costs. So let's break this down a little bit more. Over 90% of cut flours are transported around the world by air. Now, that leaves about 10% for sea freight. When COVID was on, the figures started to change much more in favour of sea freight, because we obviously just stopped flying and international travel just completely ground to a halt, the planes and everything. But it's still about 90% of cut flours are flown around the world. And the refrigeration is really important because the flours have to obviously be kept in this continuously cold, temperature controlled environment in order to keep them dormant. So that means cold aeroplanes, refrigerated storage areas on the farm, refrigerated lorries, and then cold storage warehouses as well. So there's this whole supply chain of everything that everywhere that the flowers go to, they have to be kept cold. So even if we switched to sea freight overnight, it takes weeks to transport products via sea freight, and it still takes an awful lot of fuel and energy to keep them cool when they're on those journeys. If you think about keeping a tanker cool for a month in order to get the flowers from A to B, even with the cost of the fuel just to get those ships from A to B, it's going to cause an increase in the prices of whatever product is on those ships. Now, greenhouse heating is another one. The Dutch do use gas for their greenhouse heating. Now, we're coming into spring at the moment, so temperatures are warming up. But the Dutch are famous for growing non-seasonal items. So it's not like they can just go out there tonight and turn all the gas off and everything will be fine. They are growing products that wouldn't be grown right now, unlike you and I. And therefore, they need to have those heaters running. But I think the biggest one that we're going to notice out of all of this is fertilizer. Now, I was listening to a news piece on the radio the other day interviewing farmers in Western Australia, and they're growing vast volumes of food and crops out there. And this Australian grower was very tempted to actually sell his stockpile of his fertilizer because he could get a better price for selling his fertilizer stock than actually putting it on his crops and making food and selling those crops. So there are some really interesting challenges that growers all over the world are having to make at the moment about whether to actually even put this fertilizer on their crops and sell it for food for people, or just sell on the fertilizer, which would be going off to do something else. So growers everywhere are going to have to make these tricky choices, and it's going to inevitably lead to price rises to some degree. Even if the war finished in the next 5 minutes, we're still going to see the aftershocks for quite some time, and I can't see the war finishing in 5 minutes either. So we're going to start seeing the costs of the imports increasing, And what does that mean? What does it look like? Well, there's a couple of things that could happen. And if you live in somewhere that's very, very wealthy, you might not see any changes whatsoever, and just normal behaviour is going to resume. But I suspect we're going to see shifts in customer behaviour. So they might reduce the amount of money that they spend on flowers. They might change their requests for the sorts of flowers that they want, or they might just decide to stop buying altogether. Now, bearing in mind that people have been planning their weddings for some time. I know my wedding event florist, she's got loads of weddings booked this year, and they were booked last year. You know, these plans have been put down a long time ago, and I don't understand, obviously, of course I don't understand the ins and outs of her business or any other florist business as to how they will deal with the pricing on these issues. But suffice to say, people who are using flowers as part of a wedding or an event that's been a long time in the planning and that they are committed to that spend, they are not going to be making I wouldn't have thought they would be making significant changes to that, but they might have to actually change to less expensive flowers if the prices have really gone through the roof. So we might then start seeing shifts in florist behaviour. They might have to start relying on alternative flowers, cheaper flowers, more foliage perhaps, but if they can get British grown, otherwise I guess they're importing that as well. I honestly don't know. I'm going to ask my wedding and event florist where she gets all her foliage from, actually. And the florist might actually be forced to be more flexible with the types of flowers they use and the minimum stem lengths they require, or whatever demands that they would normally make. Now, here's where British growers come in, because we are uniquely positioned now as an alternative supply chain. When the imports become more expensive and margins are reduced for every single element of that supply chain, because if you think of everybody that handles those flowers from the moment that they are cut in a greenhouse in Kenya, for example, at every touch point before they make it into the UK, there is a supplier that is handling the movement of them, and they're all going to take a cut. They're all going to want to make their margin. And as these margins get squeezed, it makes it less lucrative to be involved in it. And we may even find that some flowers no longer even become available because it's just too expensive to bring them in. So I think what it means for us is to very much carry on focusing on our hardy annuals, the things that we do best in the UK, and our perennials for low maintenance, plant them and they're done, don't need as much water as the annuals, etc. Plus all of our fantastic foliage and the shrubs, and also particularly the flowers that do not ship well. So some things like sweet peas and cosmos and dahlia and all the classic English garden things anyway, the nigella and the larkspur and all of that, that just don't ship particularly well. Now, having said that, I have seen sweet peas shipped into the UK, and they arrived in this enormous box for literally one tiny posy, and they were wrapped in all of this tissue paper and bubble wrap and everything. It's like an environmental catastrophe right there. So they can be shipped, but again, the cost of shipping them as well means that I think we're quite well placed to be able to offer these to people in this country. Now, we obviously specialize in outdoor grown things, and we can do quite a quick turnaround, especially with things like the annuals. You know, they grow very quickly, they're ready to go very quickly, and if you choose ones that have a high stem yield per square meter, you're getting much more productivity from 1 square meter or one plant, however you want to think about it. So if you're not already selling to florists and you are thinking, I wonder how the impact of all of this is going to affect my sales, perhaps you've got CSAs or you do market stalls or anything, and you're thinking, I wonder if consumers are actually going to reduce or stop buying a weekly bouquet from me if things get tough, then it might be an idea to reach out to local florists and make contact and offer them some of your own product, and just be able to diversify your outlets, just really, I guess, to hedge your bets. Now, I'm my primary focus has always been growing for wholesale. As you know, I was very nervous about going to markets and selling to actual people. And at the end of last year, I decided that actually I really should start doing that, because particularly when my wedding and event florist went on holiday and I didn't have anyone to sell to, I was just completely panic stricken. I thought, I can't just have one sales channel, I'm going to have to do a lot more. But over the last few months, I've been trying to refine my focus and actually think, you know what, this year I am just going to focus on the florists, which is what I want to do, the wholesale to florists. Because when I started looking into all of the options for all the other things, it really just became slightly overwhelming. And partly that was me just being a bit of a wuss, and also really just breaking down the numbers, because at the end of last year, I was thinking, oh, yes, I can go and do my local market. It's not a problem. And then I did my course with Jenny Marks, and we discussed things like what you need when you actually go to market, and all the equipment and the logistics and the timings and so many things. And I'd obviously have to package them all up properly and wrap them and, sort out the branding and the signage and all the marketing. And it just became this enormous thing. And I just thought, you know what, I really should get one element of my business sorted, which is my primary focus, wedding and event florist. And when I'm really good at that in a few years, then will be the time to branch out into something else, because I'm very much somebody that likes to do lots of new things all the time. You've probably realized that by now. And I start all of these projects, and my family have pretty much just given up, because I every so often I'll have a new idea and I think I'll go and do that, and all it means is that I have less time to focus on my primary goal, which is the wedding event florist, and everything becomes a little bit scattergun. So I've really had to rein myself in this year. I'm quite overcommitted to lots of stuff already. And I really have to be very, very, very good at doing one thing. And that is going to be selling to wedding and event florists on my Shopify store when it actually goes live. So I am not actually rushing to do any other sales whatsoever. And I'm hoping that this kind of situation, as horrendous as it is, and I can't stress that enough, is an opportunity for florists to look on British growers in a far more favourable way and think, well, actually, British growers aren't as expensive as we thought they were, or as they were when compared to the imports, because we are always constantly compared to imports. And this positions us in a really great way to be able to say, well, look, we've got this fantastic outdoor grown, gorgeous, beautiful, diverse range of flowers, and we've actually got scented roses, if that's your thing, and they're going to be priced very, very competitively. So that is what I wanted to talk to you about tonight, and I hope it's of interest. I hope it's of interest. And so I hope very much that you have a good rest of the week. I will be back on Friday as normal, including the plant profile of the week. I haven't decided what I'm going to talk about yet. It's not too late to get your questions in for my wedding and event florist. I haven't arranged the interview yet, so you have time. I've had some fantastic questions through already, really, really good ones, and I know she's really looking forward. Actually, no, I don't think she is looking forward to it. I think she's going to do it because she's lovely. I am really looking forward to it because I get to absolutely pick her brains. So please do send me any questions that you've got for her. No stupid questions at all. No one's going to be laughing at what you've sent in, I promise. So you can send me a DM on Instagram if you like. All my website details in the show notes. You can drop me an email, whatever you feel like doing. But please do get in touch. I always love hearing from you. I love to know that you're out there and you're listening. And please come back and join me on Friday for the very next episode. You'll be very, very welcome. All the best.